Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookishrealm. Welcome back to another video, or welcome if you're new here today. So you can see from the title of this video, we're here to talk about the infamous Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. So I started this project a while ago, last year, revisiting children's books that have often been considered problematic. And that is in direct reference to the fact that the American Library Association did change the Laura Ingalls Wilder Award. They changed the name of it because of the problematic material that was found in the Little House series. So what I've been doing is revisiting some children's books that I've read, children's classics, and taking some of y'all's recommendations and really just discussing the ups and downs, essentially giving a review and then also giving some reader's advisory at the end of some titles to check out and like to read in tandem with or to read instead of, depending upon whatever your preference is. My aim and my goal with these is never to try to ban or challenge anything. It is simply a way to open dialogue and have discussion about books that may have been written in a different time than and in a different lens than what we are seeing now in the 21st century. So we're going to go ahead and dive into that. But before we get started, I would like to thank today's sponsor, and that is Rose Forever. So Rose Forever creations are crafted by exceptional rose artisans, widely experienced in floral art designs. These handmade masterpieces are customized just for you. Every Rose Forever creation is handmade with you in mind. So each of their gorgeous arrangements are creatively designed and prepared. The preserved roses used at Rose Forever come from a well-cultivated rose field. Each rose is cared for until it reaches its peak and then carefully picked. From there, each rose is treated with a formula to help preserve them. With proper care, their preserved roses last a year. One of the things that I really enjoy about Rose Forever is that they have so many different options and varieties in their collections, from the black velvet collection to the pink suede to the crystal, and there's so many beautiful colors to choose from. I love that they have purple roses, purple and lavender, because of the fact that that's like my favorite hue of color. Like I love anything that has any type of purple tone to it. So I absolutely love that. The roses are also hypoallergenic, which is exceptionally important for me because I have horrible allergies. And so it's great to be able to engage in nature without worrying about, you know, completely breaking out in hives. So one of the great things is that from now until February 15th, they have a special Valentine's Day sale for 60% off on all bouquets, which I think is amazing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to provide y'all with the link to the website, and then also using my code Bookishrealm 25, you can get $25 off of your order. So that's amazing, but you can find all of that stuff in the description box down below. Okay, y'all, so Rose Forever was actually kind enough to send me one of their pink suede boxes, which I have taken. Don't mind me, okay? I took the top off of this a little bit because I couldn't resist looking at it before I put it in this video, because I already have one of these that's sitting in my downstairs bathroom, and then I'm gonna put this one in my upstairs bathroom, so now it's like a good balance that I have two. But I chose the red rose bouquet, which is absolutely gorgeous, and it smells so great, y'all. It smells so good, and it's absolutely beautiful. This is perfect for Valentine's Day. If you want to get this for yourself, or if you have a special someone that you want to gift this to, this is the perfect opportunity to get it. Remember that my code is Bookishrealm 25, which will get you $25 off, and they are currently doing 60% off all of their bouquets from now until February 15th. I'll leave the link to the website down below. As always, thank you so much to Rose Forever for sponsoring this video. Like, I can't get enough. It smells so good. Okay, y'all, so let's go ahead and dive into the meat of the story. So I'm not gonna really do a synopsis of Peter Pan because most people know what Peter Pan is about. Maybe I should do, because I'm making an assumption here. It's not fair for me to make an assumption that everyone knows what Peter Pan's about. Everyone's read Peter Pan or they've seen an adaptation. So Peter Pan is considered to be a children's classic, and it follows the main character, Wendy Darling, from my understanding, this originally started off as a play and then was later adapted into a novel. And so we follow Wendy Darling and her two siblings as they encounter Peter Pan for the first time. It's a little boy who has never apparently grown up and lives in this faraway place called Neverland. So he ventures to the Darling household, takes their three kids to Neverland. They have these adventures, and then things happen from there. So I must say that as a kid, I don't remember whether I've read Peter Pan in its entirety or not. I'm not sure if I have. I've seen so many adaptations of Peter Pan that I think that I may have had kind of like a memory thing where I'm remembering the movie and thinking that I read the book and haven't really read the book. I will say that after reading this book, the 2003 adaptation with, I think his name is Jeremy Sumpter, I could be wrong, but the 2003 adaptation of this is probably the most accurate that I've seen, like line by line, although they do change some of the more offensive content for, you know, 2000s, which, you know, the stuff that was in here would not have been socially acceptable. So when you're going to this, I must point out, because I'm going to talk about the problematic aspects of it first, because I'm just going to go ahead and get that away. And then we're going to talk about whether I actually enjoyed reading this or not, whether I found any part of it entertaining. So there's a lot to be said about when this was written. We're talking early 20th century when this is coming out in novel form, in which you're going to have a different perception of gender roles and class, as well as a different perspective on BIPOC communities. Does it make it right? No, but this book is very much so of its time, but it doesn't make it any less more difficult to read this book. It was very hard to read it sometimes. There was a specific slur that was used for Native American and Indigenous communities, which I'm not going to repeat on camera because I just cannot even put myself in the place to even say that word over 20 times. And it became so apparent to me because it was used just back to back to back to back to back to back to back, that I was just like, oh my gosh, this is literally the state of mind that people were in during this time. It does not excuse the behavior whatsoever, but it just was so grossly apparent, the blatant racism towards Native and Indigenous communities. And then there was a specific line in this in which they were then said to have called Peter the Great White Father. If that's not a sign of colonialism and imperialism at play, I really at this point I don't know what is. There was also some interesting aspects of this related to gender roles, specifically with Wendy. So there was a part early in the book that made me feel relatively uncomfortable in terms of what felt like hypersexualizing a minor. There was a line that indicated that Wendy was every bit a woman from head to toe, and it's like, no, Wendy was in fact a little girl. And so it just made that weird. And then there was reinforcement of gender roles where Wendy was, without really her explicit permission, forced to become a wife and a mother, and it read as if these were the roles that she was supposed to aspire to become. And honestly, it's not that surprising to see those gender roles apparent in a work that is coming out during this time. Is it difficult for me to read this in terms of someone who's living in the 21st century and is breaking every sense of gender roles that exist? Absolutely. It is very difficult to kind of see past that, even with recognizing that this is very much so a book of its time. Now, I don't know, and this is me being completely transparent, and it could be ignorant on my part. I'm not sure how people read this and see the magic of it without really delving into the very difficult meat of the story, the racism, the misogyny, the hypersexualization. Like, I don't know how you look past that and say, well, you know, I enjoy and I you know, some people are able to kind of separate a book from its time. I just don't think maybe I'm one of those people. And so even when I was starting it and I was reading it, I was like, I don't know how people are able to continue to read this, you know, last year, the year before, and like, oh, I love this story. And I'm like, but oh gosh, like, how did you get past those problematic aspects of it? Because I struggle with that. Not only did I struggle with this, y'all, Peter Pan is incredibly boring. This is probably one of the most boring children's classics that I have ever read. It was a slog to get through this book, and this edition of this book is not even 200 pages long. It's not even 200 pages long. And so it was just fascinating knowing that I was continuously struggling with this book, and it took me a couple of days to read it, which usually for a children's classic this size would not take me a couple of days to read it. It took me a couple of days to read this because I just found it was incredibly dry. Bits and pieces of it really didn't make any sense. I was trying to figure out, why did the darling parents leave their kids at home without any true adult supervision? We had Nana, who was a dog, and so I'm like, what is going on here? So it was that element. Peter was not a likable character. Peter was just not, he wasn't likable. I think it was interesting looking at Peter from a critical point of view and kind of relating it back to J.M. Barrie's kind of desire to live in childhood, to maintain that essence of being childlike, being a kid in spirit and in heart, regardless of your age. I think it was interesting looking at how he constructed Peter Pan, which I think may have been a direct reflection of his own desires to remain childlike and young. I mean, I could be young. I could be wrong. I could be young. I wish I could be young. I could be wrong in my analysis of that because I haven't really read much on the life of J.M. Barrie, but it very much seemed like that was his kind of ideal of adulthood, like that fear of adulthood, that wanting to maintain childhood for forever. And I feel like he used Peter Pan as a way to connect himself to those feelings. Like I said, I could be wrong. I did find it interesting too that it seemed like, and I looked this part up because I was wondering if I was interpreting this wrong. It seems like there is some connection between Hook and Mr. Darling, as if they could be one and the same person. Now, I know in the stage play of this, they often use the same person to play both roles, and in the 2003 movie adaptation, the actor who played Mr. Darling also played Hook. And so I'm wondering if that was the intention, because it felt a little like it was insinuated, but once again, I could be reading too much into it. I just felt like there wasn't much going on. And it could be because I was already familiar with the story, and so I kind of knew what to expect, and because I knew the story, and then there were so much problematic pieces of it that it just kind of took me out, and there was no magic for me. It was like, I don't know how Peter was appealing to anyone. Hook was probably the driest villain in a children's book that I have ever come across. I felt like the pacing was very unusual because it seems like we were kind of lackadaisical in the beginning. You know, Wendy gets there, she's taking care of the Lost Boys, and they're kind of living this fake parental, you know, thing with the kids. Like we're playing house as kids, which, you know, is actually not very far removed from what some people even in my generation have dealt with, that playing house and playing a mom and playing a wife, but it's such a strong reinforcement of gender roles that we don't necessarily see as often in the 21st century, or there's more discussion about not reinforcing gender roles in the 21st century. But it seemed like it was just so slow, and then we have this connectedness to Peter and Hook and their issues, and Peter trying to fight Hook, and even Tinkerbell. It was like, well, Tinkerbell is a complete asshole in this entire situation. She's not a likable character, although I don't think she's even a likable character. She's not a likable character in the movies either. But this book for me just didn't have any redeeming qualities, and that's outside of the problematic tidbits. It's completely outside of the, I just thought that this book was dry and completely boring. And listen, I feel like I don't ever say this, but I feel like I did the Lord's work in reading this for this series, because even when I read Little House in the Big Woods, there were pieces and parts of it that I did find interesting. And this, it was those two things that I mentioned, but for the most part, I was just like, when is this book going to be over? Now, I will say that in reading this, I'm very curious to learn more about J.M. Barrie, because I know that there were some accusations about his lifestyle outside of the creation of this book and how it is directly related to the creation of this book, and whether that is directly related to some of the kind of hypersexualization that happens with Wendy, also with Peter, to be honest with you, because there was a line where it was kind of insinuated that Peter's voice did things to women, like it enticed all women. And granted, he is a child frozen in time, but he's presenting as a child. So while technically he may be an old man, I just didn't sit right with me at all. And then I question Wendy's kind of judgment here, because even after she knew that Peter's not a very likable human and he's very difficult to get along with, you still let your child go with him, and then their child, and it's just this generational cycle of people or young women going with Peter. And I'm just like, what? I felt like there's a deeper meaning to that I didn't quite grasp. So if you understand that section more than me, please let me know, because I felt like there was something there that I was missing in terms of it alluding to something more. But yeah, y'all, I mean, just for the most part, like this was not a children's classic necessarily for me. But the purpose of me picking these children's classics is to, and not just children's classics, I think just revisiting a lot of older children's works, because some of them could be modern classics. I think that the purpose of revisiting this is to kind of figure out how to have open discussions about these works without saying that we need to get rid of them, that they need to be taken off the shelves. Because I think that that can be a first instinct, especially when there's harmful content within the books. But as someone who is a librarian, I can't within any heart and soul of mine say that we need to remove this off the shelves. It shouldn't be taught. But I take it in perspective of, if you're going to read these books with your kids, be ready and be open to having conversations about why this content exists, why this content existed in that time, and why it may not be appropriate for now. And then what I'm going to do right now is I also like to suggest books to read in tandem that have maybe the same vibes, maybe take place during the same time, or maybe direct retellings of the books that are done in a better way, maybe have a wider range of diversity, less problematic content. Like when I did the Little House in the Big Woods review, I talked about even reading like the Birch Bark series. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. It's late, y'all. I'm trying to get this I said to read that in tandem, because both of those books take place during the same time, but where the Little House series kind of leaves out the Native and Indigenous perspective, or presents it in a very offensive and racist manner, you get the actual perspective from a Native and Indigenous author that has done research about that time. So I'm going to do the same with Peter Pan. I have 2 recommendations to give to you if you would like to read them instead of or in tandem with Peter Pan. So the first one that I have to recommend is The Sisters of the Never Sea, and this is by Cynthia Smith. This is a middle grade book that shifts the focus of Peter Pan. So it's a take on Peter Pan, but it shifts the focus of it being off of Peter and onto these 2 sisters, one Native and one English. And the 2 of them are really, really close friends, and they become really close friends, and then, or they become closer friends, I should say that. They become closer friends when their parents end up getting married, so they're stepsisters. So they are kind of struggling with the fact that their parents are no longer getting along, and they decide to spend the summers apart like the parents do. And so now the girls are questioning what that's going to mean for their relationship as stepsisters as well as friends. And then in the background you have a boy who is coming and basically saying like he wants to take them away to this faraway magical land called Neverland, and so they're going to learn more about it. I definitely would recommend checking this one out. I think that one of the good things about this is that you're gonna get a novel that is going to address or to take a perspective of Peter Pan and still acknowledge its issues, but also try to pull the magic out of it that a lot of people saw when they were reading it as they were, you know, younger kids. Okay, and the last one that I have to recommend is On These Magic Shores by Emil Mendez. So this is not necessarily a direct retelling of Peter Pan. It has a Peter Pan-esque element, which follows a main character by the name of Minerva, who is 12 years old and is responsible for taking care of her two sisters because her mom works 2 jobs. And so she's struggling with trying to balance all of her responsibilities and just being a kid. And then one night her mother inevitably ends up disappearing. And so to protect her family from ICE, she does not want to let anybody know that her mother is not present. But things kind of go left as she's auditioning for a role in Peter Pan. So there's some elements, some discussions of Peter Pan within the context of this book, but it's not necessarily a direct retelling. But I think if you want something that's going to discuss a lot of social issues, but still include those magical elements and probably a little bit of discussion about Peter Pan as a play, then I would recommend checking this one out. All right, y'all, so that is it. That is the next installment in the series. If you have any recommendations of children's series or books that you would like to see me read as part of this specific project, let me know in the comment box below and I definitely will consider it. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. If you're interested in following me on social media or supporting the channel, all the links will be down in the description box below, and I'll be back with another video soon. Toodles!